so that we can share tonight's fireside chat with others who are unable to join us in real time. But we are so thankful to have each of you in the virtual place to be. My name is Sylvina Brooks Powers, and I am the Majority Whip in the New York City Council. I represent the 31st Councilmatic District, covering the communities of Laurelton, Rosedale, Springfield Gardens, Brookville, Edgemere, Auburn, and Far Rockaway. And we are celebrating Women's History Month, and I thought it was not a better time than now to bring some powerful voices in women in leadership directly to you from wherever you are choosing to view from. We are joined tonight by two amazing women in their own right. We have Mrs. Karen Boykin-Towns, the National NAACP Vice President. We also are joined by Chief Juanita Holmes, who is the NYPD Chief of Training, and also a former captain in a precinct in my district. We miss her dearly out in the Far Rockaway community and also in Southeast Queens. She had two of my precincts, actually. And so tonight we have a bunch of questions. We encourage everyone to drop questions into the chat box, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. But before we get started, I want to give a moment or two to each of our speakers this evening to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll take it from there. So Karen, would you like to start first?
Sure. Thank you, Majority Whip, for having me. I am a huge fan of the Chiefs, and so it's so great to be on a panel with her. But I'm Karen Boykin-Towns, and I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm originally from Harlem, and I happen to serve now as Vice Chairman of the NAACP National Board of Directors. I was the immediate past president of the Brooklyn branch, where I served for 7 years, where now the great president is my sister girlfriend, L. Joy Williams. But you know, I'm a kid from New York, grew up in Harlem, and really went to public schools, and just through sort of navigating and having a village of people who loved me and supported me, really allowed me to build a career where, after 22 years with one of the world's largest biopharmaceutical companies, Pfizer Inc., I retired 3 years ago. But retirement, I should really just say I no longer work at Pfizer because my life is extremely busy. I'm a senior counselor at a global communications firm. I have my own consulting business. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm really honored to be able to have this opportunity to just have a little girl talk.
No, thank you so much for that. Excited to have you here, and someone in leadership in the NAACP who I've been a member of since my days in college and held a number of positions, and so excited about the work that you do throughout the city and state, and you are a force, and we thank you for being here. And next we will hear from none other than the wonderful Chief Juanita Holmes. We can't hear you. Oh, the other, okay, here we go. Let me see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I was muted, so my apologies. Thank you, Majority Whip. Thank you so much for inviting me this evening. And thank you to my co-panelists. Equally honored to be with you as well. And celebrating just Women's History Month. I think it's so important that we recognize one another, support one another, lift one another up. And it's a great time, especially seeing the first African-American woman nominated for Supreme Court. I know I've been watching, so I know all of you have been watching as well. But it's definitely tremendous times now. A little bit about myself. I'm born in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I basically that's where my family lived. I think I moved to Queens when I was about 4 years old. We left Brooklyn, never really leaving because that's where your grandparents are. But that's why I went to public school equally. And I am a product of a public school education. And I grew up doing that. I went to college with intentions of practicing medicine. My bachelor's is actually in science, believe it or not. But then I got pulled in by my sister and a common friend to join the force. And now it's 35 years later, come July, that I began with NYPD, and no regrets. Challenges, yes. Adversity, yes, but no regrets. I truly felt that I am privileged and honored to have really chosen the right profession in helping people, being there for the community, being there also to lead some of the men and women that have worked for me in this agency. So thank you again for allowing me to be here with you this evening.
Oh, thank you both for answering the call. We've been looking forward to this evening's event, and I certainly know that our guests here today were as well. So I just want to kick off with the first question of the evening. What foundational moments led to the person that you are today?
Okay, I'll start. I think, and I like the fact that you say moments, because I think that there is never just one. At least for me, it wasn't just one. I think, certainly watching my mom as she was an advocate for me and my sister early in our educational journey. Like I said, I grew up in Harlem, and the schools there were not great. And she somehow worked it where I was bused down to 66th Street between First and York when I was in the second grade, because she thought I could get a better education there. And so, that was, I was a kid, but I knew that I was different from my friends who very few people looked like me at the school. And so I think seeing her from an early age as an advocate, then my godmother was the president of 1199. So, here she was, Doris Turner Keyes. So she was a union leader, a female in the rough and tumble world of labor, and sort of watching her and watching how she led and watching how, she, stood up for not just herself, but for her members. I think those were early on. And then I would say when I was at Pfizer, quite frankly, a foundational moment was, or a significant turning moment was when, I had been there quite a while. I had proven myself, but I wasn't getting past, the senior director level, and having to figure out how to navigate with the most senior leaders and get the then CEO to sort of, as he said, become my turbo boost to really break through where, for whatever reason, I wasn't able to get past. That was a foundational moment because it helped me to see, kind of how it really is in corporate America, but also how I could sort of help others. And then that became, what I began doing sort of for other, Black and brown people within the company. So I'll stop there.
Oh,
I mean, that's wonderful. It's interesting to see that, different spaces and time, different communities, how we share similar journeys. And I too was bused out of my neighborhood to be able to get a good education, and middle school being bused to Bayside, where also I went to school with people who didn't necessarily look like me either, but the ones that did were all coming and being bused in from Jamaica, Queens as well. And Chief Holmes, how about you?
So my foundational moment, I have to equally say my mother, who's no longer here with us, but I think about the fact that I have 12 siblings, 6 brothers, 6 sisters. I am the second oldest, and I was really the second mother. When you're younger and you're doing a lot chores and you're helping out and their homework and feeding them and cooking and just managing, right? And when I think about that type of management that I was doing at such an early age, I didn't realize then I was being trained for what I do now. And,
Wow.
I truly, you're young, and when you're young, you're like, I don't want to do this. But when I think back now, you see what my mother helped me to achieve, because now I managed, especially in my last capacity, over 20,000 people. And, you do that naturally with great help, a lot of great men and women working, with you. But I think about now I'm in training and I'm over all the training for the entire department, which is another heavy, field to be in. But I welcome it. It's challenging in itself, but I truly attribute where I'm at now to that foundation that my mother laid out for me, and that was playing second mom, believe it or not.
No, that's wonderful. And, just knowing that you do have, I'm sure, that nurturing side and then that tough side, and you're helping to shape the people that are out there that are serving our communities, especially in such a, what I call a pivotal time is right now, when we're trying to find that opportunity to strengthen the police community relations. And so, bring in personal experience into these moments that are solid foundations, I'm sure is extremely helpful and needed.
Yes.
In the same vein, like, what leaders did you look up to?
So well, first of all, I admired my mom for all that she did. That's for sure. And then, I had, my mom's sister, my aunt, she was in the medical field and she was the RN nurse. And I think that's what drove me to medicine. I always had this interest in the mind and the body and how it worked. And, she really played a huge role in that. We were very close. She was my godmother. And, I was very close with her. But once I joined NYPD, so I didn't have leaders that I looked up to that looked like me, because there were very few women, very few women of color. So predominantly male dominated. But I still had my own direction. So yes, I always wanted to, I knew from the time that I joined the police department that whatever exams I can take to control my future, as far as elevation was concerned in NYPD, I was going to do that. And, it's funny, I see people that I went to the academy with, they said, you always said you were going to be a chief. And I did. I pretty much claimed it, but a lot of hard work came with that. So a lot of my role models were men, believe it or not. It really was. And just watching them and how they operated, and in a positive and negative way, right? I saw a lot of what I said I would never do. And then I saw things that I thought was great that I said, yes, I would mirror that, in a certain form of fashion. But, I always say there's two ways of learning, right? But I never want to learn, what I felt in my heart was not the right way of policing. It wasn't what the agency stood for. And, with that, I always just said the only way that I can bring change was to get in that position myself and do things differently. And so that was my drive, to accomplish what I've accomplished today.
Karen, I'm with you. I could listen to the chief all day, but you even have.
I just want to listen and ask questions myself.
But even with you having the corporate experience, like, what was that like? Like, who did you have to look up to as well?
So, what's so funny? When I went to corporate for that year, amazing, because first of all, I was the first, I think there's only two other individuals, when I say individuals, whatever respective rank, that left NYPD and went into a field that wasn't something kind of police related. I interviewed for it. They fell in love with me, and it was probably 2 interviews, and then I was meeting what they call the C-suite, right? Mm-hmm. And very interesting position, traveled the world. When I got there, though, transitioning from government, spending 30 years here, probably a little more than that, transitioning to the private sector, that was a huge transition. The private sector is very different. if I thought I was seeing adversities, or I should say, inequalities here in NYPD, I was definitely seeing it in the private sector, especially at the level that I was at. So with that, I remember speaking at a speaking engagement about transitioning from government to corporate. And it was huge for me because it's different. I'm used to barking out orders. People are receptive. There, people get a little nervous and it's like, oh, she upset with me. And then when you say, okay, I'm thinking about doing things a little different, because those positions are considered at will, I think it is, or whatever. People, it to them, it was like I was saying, okay, I'm taking your job, or you're no longer needed. So I really had to learn and adapt to the culture in the private sector, because it was completely different. It was like going from the military, to a different corporation. So it was challenging to begin with, not challenging as far as the work, just in adapting to the culture. And that's something that I eventually did. But as a result of such, I enjoyed it. I just think it wasn't suitable because the traveling, they covered 35 countries. And when they said I was responsible for all 35 countries' safety and security, they literally meant it.
Absolutely.
The traveling I did in 1 year was amazing in one respect, but overwhelming in another respect.
Yeah,
So,
I can imagine.
yes, but I was very fortunate at that time. We were just getting a new police commissioner. Commissioner Shea was coming in to office, and he reached out to me, I'd say about in November. And we have this clause in NYPD. You can come back as long as you come back 1 day shy of 1 year. So you can go out and venture out and then, retire, but you can come back to NYPD, but naturally they have to want you back, right? It has to be someone that they want back, because they do have the option of making that decision. So once he told me he was going to be the new PC and he had some plans and he wanted me for certain positions, I was a little reluctant because we all know the private sector pays very good money, especially bank. They just do. And my passion was here with the community, with the cops, but I was like, oh, this is a toss up. And I declined initially in November. I told him, maybe another time, knowing I didn't have much time. And then something came over me in December and I came back. And and I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all. And it was right before, a couple of months before we were met with COVID and, Black Lives Matter. We were met with those protests and it was challenging, but equally, I've been here a long time. So I've been through the Crown Heights, the Washington Heights, right? But, we have a very young job now. So a lot of those officers never saw anything like this. Yeah. My son included, who has about 6.5 years on, he's a detective now. And I remember him saying, Mom, what's going on? We didn't do anything wrong to them. But I said, you have to realize it's the uniform, right? And we represent an agency, but not just here in New York City. It's throughout the nation and international. So, I had to explain to him, I said, listen, I've been through this, and believe me, give it a little while, they're going to love you again. and it's the truth, I said, but there's a saying, all great change is preceded by chaos sometimes. And it was where it wasn't chaos for the community standing their ground, standing up for what was right, standing up for change. It felt that way to NYPD, and mostly because I think it was just, we've never been met with that mass amount of people. And that's what happened. And naturally we had our flaws, right? There were some training issues, definitely with how do you secure or for lack of a better term, police events like where people it's their constitutional right to protest and have a voice. So how do you police that? And we saw where we were lacking. We had these specialty units that we train, instead of pulling police officers out of their precincts, let them stay in the community and then use these groups, right? Well, the mass amount of people we were met with, those groups weren't sufficient at all. So, we had to go back, and we do this. We take a look back. What did we do wrong? What could we have done better? And we build off of that. And out of respect to that, we've implemented now where every officer is trained in disorder control, right? Because there's a difference, right, in policing. I should say, we call it constitutional policing, right? Events. There's a difference in policing that than policing something where it's a barricaded person that just caused harm to someone. It's completely different. So we had it was a lesson for us, to really look back and see what we should have done differently and now what we do differently.
No, thank you for that. And
It's interesting because I spent the first 9 years of my career in government. I worked for right out of college for my state senator, David Patterson, one of my bestest friends in the whole wide world, and then worked for the Senate Democratic leader, Fred Ornstein, and then Marty Connor. So I did 9 years in government politics, never knowing that that would be how I would get my start, because I was a business major in college, and I've always been pretty sort of corporate in my thinking, and that's always where I wanted to go. But I had this opportunity right out of college, and it was the best thing I could have ever done. There 9 years. So when I went to Pfizer, for me, the transition from government to corporate wasn't very challenging for me, because it was really sort of like I would have liked, the running of the district office and the running of to be more sort of, business-like and that sort of thing. But I had to adjust. And I think that was one of my first times in terms of having to learn to be flexible, to be adaptable, to be able to not have everything lined up perfectly, but to be able to pivot. Because when you're working with the community, you got to pivot. Right. So when I went into corporate America, it was like, now, yes, there were, what did you say, Chief? There were challenges, it was adversities and all those things. But I think when you come out of politics, you kind of know how to navigate, you know how to get things done, you can read how things line up and know kind of the levers to push. So I think I went in at a different level than most people of color coming out of politics and being very successful in that realm. And, for 22 years, I moved up. And when I left the company, I reported to the woman who reports to the chairman and CEO of the company. I was in the C-suite. I had a global role. Over my 22 years, Chief, like you, I traveled the world. I had 2 children, and so had to navigate that. My husband was an elected official and then a commissioner, and so having to navigate all of that. But what I would say, though, is that it really allowed me to grow and to learn. In each role, I wanted to challenge myself. I never wanted to get comfortable. I never wanted to stay in a role that so at one point after my first 9 years with the company, I probably changed roles every 24 months or so. And so while it was hard, because I never kind of was like, just where it's like, oh, I can sort of like breathe. It really allowed me to continue to grow and get experiences and capabilities that most people really never have. And it made me, I think, so unique. And so when people read my background, they're like, oh my gosh, because I really challenged myself. And that's, and sometimes I didn't even know, but opportunities come your way and you have to make the decision. And you have to believe in yourself. What is it says? You got to bet on yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're given the opportunity, we will soar. But too often we're not given the opportunities. And when they come our way, you really need to think twice before you turn them down.
No,
unless you go against your values. Now that,
yeah.
and then that's a whole nother conversation.
That's
And
it.
in the same vein as you talk about like the balance and the navigating, I'm going to start with this question with you, Karen. There's a question in the chat box that reads, as most professional women are mothers and wives, how do you balance your work responsibilities and personal life demands? Is there a balance really? So I'm interested in hearing your perspective because I'm a new mom. I have a 2-year-old. She's in the other room. She probably will make a guest appearance at some point, but I would love to hear from you on that balance too.
I've said publicly and privately that there's really no balance. I think, you know, you try and there's going to be times when work is work and you're finding yourself having to lean more into that. And for me, it was really making sure that my children had what they needed to be able, if I knew they were safe, they were good, they had it what they needed. Then when that part of work is over, then, you know, there's an opportunity to lean more into home, but always knowing what was critical. So, you know, making parent-teacher conferences. I remember one time I had to go to South Africa. Senator Diane, oh gosh, I can't remember her name. She was the state senator from California, was taking a delegation to South Africa, and we had operations in South Africa, and they needed someone to go. And so I knew of her, whatever. And so they asked me to go. And that meant not being like, it was over Thanksgiving. It was just like, what? I gotta be home for Thanksgiving. So I flew over, I hosted her delegation for probably like 24 hours. And I got home in time for dinner Thanksgiving. Wow. Because it was important to me that I, you know, and so family came first, because the other thing I always knew is that no matter how much success I had at Pfizer and how wonderful it was, at the end of the day, there was not going to be anyone from Pfizer at my bedside when I was sick or when I needed something. And at the end of the day, they give you these gold watches or whatever it is that they do, but you then have your family. And if you haven't done what's necessary, you may not have a family. And so that was always paramount for me. I really don't think there's a balance, but I think as long as you are making sure that you're taking care of yourself, you're making sure your family is good, and you're trying to maintain some semblance, and knowing that there's going to be time when work has to kind of be more on the front burner, but it doesn't always last that way. And it becomes important for discernment of what really is important, right? Because you could be on your phone looking at your device and doing emails all the time, but the question is, what is necessary? And just being busy doesn't make that important. It doesn't mean that you're having impact. And so the higher you go, the tougher it is, quite frankly, because you're trying not to be left behind, because you're trying not to be left behind because you think this one want to kind of cut you. You just gotta, be confident in yourself and be confident in knowing that, you have something that is special and that is important to the company. But at the end of the day, I never let Pfizer be my whole life. Pfizer was an important part of my life, but unlike a lot of my colleagues where the company becomes their existence, when that goes away, because what does it say? You can love a company, but a company will never love you back. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, business is business. And if they have to make a tough call and your number is up and you have to go, you got to know who you are. You have to have your own identity. And so I'm just really thankful that, I, had my husband, I had my family, I had my mom, my sister, my kids to really help me realize that success is great. But at the end of the day, that's not what defines who I am.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for that. I mean, Whew, that was everything right there. And I know I saw people in the chat box saying it, and I saw the faces across the screen, but absolutely, because I know as women, we often find that guilt one way or another. It's like, am I shortchanging my teammates, or am I shortchanging my family, and which one? And I will say I'm a walking testimony. Like if it wasn't for us losing the majority after the 2010 elections, I would have probably still been working in the state Senate because I was comfortable. And sometimes God will shake you up and move you out of your own way and you realize like, okay, I left the Senate. The Senate is still working. They're okay. They're even better right now with a supermajority, but they're okay. So, we have to remind ourselves to prioritize our loved ones. Now, Chief, and I know we have a limited amount of time. So I see there's a question here for the NYPD panelists. In your professional relationship with counterparts, have you or do you encounter resentment or pushback from those you command? If so, how do you handle?
Well, so, you're always going to have that, right? Even if it's done quietly, right? So everyone's not going, because when there's a certain rank structure and a certain discipline, people are not usually going to verbally, express discontent or, not be supportive of what it is that you intend, that you would like to do as far as your mission and vision is concerned. So with I've been here a long time. I'm called pretty much a tough cookie. Like anyone that knows me, this is what they'll say. She doesn't play, that's their saying. But the thing is, first, I believe in discipline. It's positive discipline, negative discipline. I always believe in coaching, trying to really talk to people and get them to understand, why this is this way or why I think we should do things that way. It could kind of be inclusive. I have zero tolerance for disrespect. I always have. So I think, the same respect that you would give a man, right? You're going to give me. And I've always been that way. And when I'm very strong in that and I hold true to it. And it's quite unfortunate because I just got here in the training bureau January. And, it's a training bureau is huge. And so, just the fact that I'm getting to learn all the different people. I've been here before as a chief when I was a 1-star, but now I'm back again as the head of the training bureau. And there's a lot of new faces, a lot of new people. And, needless to say, I was met with an incident last night when I'm touring a couple of people from City Hall that I felt was totally, totally unacceptable. So something of that nature, I'll have to, move you along. It's going to be a little bit more harsher discipline than if it was a mistake of the heart, right? So I don't have a problem with disciplining. I don't. And even if you're my peer, you're going to know how I feel. You can be my peer and we can agree to disagree, but I'm never going to be the person that goes along to get along. And I think anyone here, executive level and down, knows Juanita Holmes. If something is not right, I'm going to call it as such, and that's just my personality because I like to sleep at night and I like to sleep well. And that's what I do. And I always believe if you're at the table and you have a voice at the table and you don't use it, then don't come to the table.
You shouldn't be there.
That's right. So I can honestly say far and few times have I been met with pushback or adversity from, members in the department, whether they were subordinates or peers. And if I politely address it and, bygones are bygones.
Yeah. Now, Karen, what challenges have you faced to get to the positions that you've reached?
I think some overt, some covert, so I'll tell you, when I left, and Majority Whip, you said it, sometimes we are where we're supposed to be for a time and a season. And when we think that, we are going to continue, God will sometimes get our attention to say time is up. And so when I left Pfizer, I was at the top of my game. I was doing great. You know, probably one of the higher ranking Blacks in the company. I was one of the top 150 in the entire world. But, you know, companies make changes, right? And they were making a change and they were like, oh, but we have a role for you. But when I learned what that role was, I was like, I ain't trying to do that. I ain't trying to do that. I mean, and it was a good role, but it's just like, well, I have kind of sort of done that before. And no, you don't get to move me like a chess piece. If anything, I get to move me how I want to be. And so when I told the CEO that I wasn't interested, they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it. But at the same time, you know, God had set it up where I could have early retirement. There was enhanced severance. I would have been a fool to stay. I would have been a fool to stay. And you know, you can always go back if that's what you want to do. But I made the decision that I've done this for 22 years. It has been a great ride. And how many of us have the freedom to be able to walk away from something like that, start our own thing, have, you know, this national platform and giving back to my community, sitting on a corporate board and other, you know, and so I just think that at the end of the day, I think sometimes people, companies think that they can do whatever they want to you and you have to take it. But at the end of the day, you have to know what is important to you. You have to know that you are the captain of your own ship. And if you're not, you need to figure out how to get in a position to be able to be that captain, because not every role is right. And we should, and as the chief said, you want to be able to sleep at night and you want to be able to do the things that are important to you. And so, you know, at Pfizer, it was great. You know, certainly I had those challenges where, you know, you had to prove yourself. And just like with Judge Brown Jackson, she is, you know, she is someone who I am watching these hearings and I'm just saying, wow, the discipline she is showing, the grace.
Cool as a cucumber.
Cool
as a cucumber.
I consider myself to be someone of an even temperament, but I think I am really having to think about how I sometimes will kind of just, you know, my temperament sometimes, because, you know, it's important. And it's important that people will treat you the way you allow them to treat you.
That's right.
And so you need to, when someone approaches you a certain way and it does not feel good, or you gotta let them know. And it's not by yelling and screaming. It's just like, just letting a person know that this is unacceptable. And, you know, they might want to think about how it is that they approach you the next time. And when you correct people, believe me, unless, you know, generally they understand it. But I think that it's important that we have agency over ourselves, and that we, you know, and guess what? We're not always like born with it, but you develop it over time. And if you feel like you may need some work on that, partner with someone, you know, your girlfriend who you admire, to kind of like try and get tips on how to think. I know there were times when I would role play, like if I had to have a tough conversation, I would work with one of my friends, but like, okay, you know, and try and work on kind of how I wanted to do it. That was a long time ago. Now, if anything, I'm coaching other people. But at the end of the day, it's important that we don't go through this alone, because more times than not, we're all experiencing some form of a challenge. And when we have our networks, we can really help each other to get through it.
No, that's wonderful. And so Chief Holmes, how can we connect with the younger women and girls today? There seems to be a lack of connect and female mentorship in the communities, is a question that was in the chat box.
Well, I tell you, I started a group when I first worked in Brooklyn. So when I became a commanding officer, it was in Brooklyn. I was in Brownsville, Crown Heights, East New York area. I was commanding officer of public service area 2. So as a result of such, I remember in Glenmore houses, I used their community room, and I got young girls from all over the community, and I called it Girl Talk. And I would bring them in, and I had, you know, young female sergeants that worked for me, lieutenants, they all were involved, all the female officers. We bring them in once a week, and we let them make the decisions. What do you want to talk about? So it could have been anything from what they desired, to do as a career. It could have been about dating, proper etiquettes, right? Just how you carry yourself as a lady and maintaining the status of a lady, right? And being graceful in your delivery and things of that nature. And I went from having that in that command to when I became a borough command in Queens North, having all 8 precincts start that particular program. And then when I became chief of patrol, had all 77 precincts start that program. So that's how I connect with young women. And it's called Girl Talk. It's still in existence now. And in addition, I did it with young men. I have like over 2,000 young men that belong to a, mentorship group that we have called Blue Chips. And that's in citywide in every borough. They give back. They do community events. They paint senior homes. They clean up parks. They have competition. They come to police headquarters and walk across the stage and get their awards. And that's a real connection, especially when you see them standing in the auditorium of One Police Plaza. You see how in awe they are, and they're happy to be there. And, these coaches that I use, young men and women, they're like older brothers and sisters to them. But it was probably, and I think still is, the most successful youth program that NYPD has ever had. And we have explorers and we have cadets, those programs. The reason I attach success to this, these were young men and women that didn't want to be cadets, didn't want to put on the police uniform, didn't want anything to do with NYPD. So it was more important for me to grab that young community than the community that we already had, right? That already wanted to mimic what we were doing or grow up in being law enforcement. So that's how I connect. And whether I'm in this capacity or another capacity or retired, I will still always connect that way because it's meaningful to me. But in another respect, because I had the large agency, where I'm not over recruitment, there's a whole nother segment of this agency that does recruitment. I felt that we weren't doing a great enough job recruiting from the communities I thought we should recruit from. Yes. So as chief of patrol, I took a group in every borough, and that's what I hit the ground doing. And I didn't just give them pamphlets. They all had iPads. They signed them up on the spot. Yes. They told them you don't need your driver's license or college credits to take the exam, only at the time of being hiring, because there was this misconception that all those requirements were necessary to sit down and take the exam. So I remember the last class, over 5,000 men and women, we signed up to take the December exam. Wow. 5,000. 5,000.
So I have someone on the side saying, how can we get Girl Talk in the district? So Chief Holmes on the side, you're going to have to tell me how I get it in some of my district. Absolutely. You're going to have me under pressure over here. So I'm going to ask one last question of both you ladies, and then we'll just give some closing remarks because I do want to be respectful of both of your time. I know you're both busy women, but I'm so thankful again for you to be here. So the last question I'll ask is, what was the best advice you received that you would give to our youth today?
So a great piece of advice I received came when I was maybe 3 years or so. I was early in my career at Pfizer, and there was this Black woman by the name of Brenda Schofield. And Brenda Schofield was one of these Black women who had been successful in corporate America early on. So she had been in several companies and had success. And she was at Pfizer at this one point. And she said, she took me to dinner and she said, Karen, she said, you're doing well. She said, but what you need to remember is that there is something different about you, and your difference is what makes you great and will make room for you to grow. You just have to remember that you can't out-white a white person.
Mm.
And I was like, and what she was saying to me was that, you know, I needed to bring those things, my insights that are different, to the table versus trying to compete with my white counterparts on the things that they knew. Like, yeah, it was important for me to know that, but I had insights and that were different. And I just had a way of doing things from government, from politics. And so that never left me. And it actually empowered me to really be even more authentic, because I probably really at that time early on, I probably wasn't bringing my whole self to work. I really wasn't sharing the amazing things I was doing outside of work and how to, and I will say that my job at Pfizer really didn't feel like a job most times, because I was able to bring the enormous resources of a company like Pfizer to communities around the country and really around the globe that may not have had access. And so I was able to do my NAACP stuff and was able to get the company to support. So my life was really sort of married together in alignment versus, you know, me doing it on the side. And so it really was a gift. And Brenda's no longer with us, but I will never, ever forget what she said, because it almost like unleashed something inside me that I don't know would have happened otherwise.
How about you, Chief?
So I just remember, you know, and I can't say that I remember who said it, but I remember someone saying to me, always be yourself, right? Always be yourself, always be yourself. And you know, first of all, I didn't know anything else. It's who I was, right? But I remember people saying that, and always, you know, I always got these responses from even people at work. You're so humble, you're so modest. You know, do you know who you are, what you do? I said, first of all, I'm Juanita Holmes, right? That's who I am, right? I am a mom. You know, I have a wonderful son and daughter. Now I'm a grandmother. You know, I have a 3.5-year-old, and my daughter had 2 beautiful twins that are 9-month-old.
Oh,
and I tell you, it really puts things in perspective, you know, when you have that. And, you know, I'm very fortunate because, you know, like Karen, you were able to be home for that Thanksgiving. There's so many times I packed my children's gifts and took to my mother's house for Christmas, because that's what the line of business that I'm in entailed. So it's a little bit different. So a lot of sleepless nights, sleeping on my couch in my office, not getting home sometimes. But I don't regret it. I have 2 wonderful children, 2 adults, both married. My son just recently married. And when I tell you, so grounded and just respectful and polite, where I thought I'm taking all this time away from them, they just latched onto what I was doing. They saw me at the dining room table, 10 hours studying. They adapted those habits. Yes. And, you know, so those are probably my very proudest moments. But I must say, when you speak about doing for others and leaving no one behind, I can't tell you, I forget how much that I do when people call me, because if you're in a position where you can do that, that's what you're there for. That's and right. I've done so much of that people say, you don't even remember you helped me, or you helped my son. So I'm very fortunate and happy to be in this position. And I know, believe me, I know the adversity met with law enforcement, but I used to tell people in the community, you better be glad I'm here, right?
That's part.
You better be glad I'm here in this community, because I'm very understanding of this community. and these cops that's standing behind me, they're going to support my vision because I taught them. Not that I bullied them into doing it. I taught them about diversity, inclusion, implicit biases before it was fancy terms.
That's
I've
right.
been doing this a long, and I did it in my own way because guess what I realized? You have to deal with the hand that's dealt you. So I can't blame young cops coming in that may have been raised in Long Island and all blue communities talking blue, all they know is blue. So I have to say there are different colors in the crayon box and they eat differently, they dress differently, right? They do things differently. And if God wanted us all to be the same, this be one boring place, I could tell you that much. But I really had to be delicate in my delivery. But when I tell you them grasping my understanding and concerns, and those are some of my proudest moments. I promise you, when you see things start to, come to fruition and you put so much work into it, just trying to create these different mindsets. And, I was in the 8-1 precinct. So I had Assemblywoman Robinson, Al Van, Hakeem Jeffries, Yvette
Towns.
I had Ed Towns, everybody. Believe me, everyone. And, and we had great relationships and they had great relationships. If they walked in the precincts, the officers, how may I help you? I made sure they knew them and they knew the community. So, I'm very happy with the career decision that I made, but I always intend on never leaving anyone behind. And I think that's true mentorship. I think it is, especially women. Everyone knows listen, I learned a lot from men, a great deal, because those were the only leaders I had once upon a time. But I believe in supporting women. And a lot of times we're the primary caregiver. We're the ones that take care and juggle and do what we do home. So I always say, listen, if there's a will, there's a way. And my term has always been, how bad do you want it? It's not for everyone, right? Leadership and climbing the ladder is not for everyone. But I have no regrets. I am truly blessed, and I'm here, and always commitment to help others.
No, thank you both for that. I know you dropped some amazing gems for everyone. I know you certainly have done it for me. And I think tonight's conversation was so important for people to be able to hear. We're going to also post this video on social media and push it out, because we need other women, especially our Black and Brown women coming up in different industries, to know what is possible. And seeing you both and seeing how you climbed the ladder and gotten to where you've gotten, and you didn't just climb, but you climbed and you reached back. And that's what's important, because like you, Chief Holmes, and I grew up in a male-dominated business of politics. And for many years, my mentors were all men as well. And so I've always been very intentional of trying to be a mentor myself to other women that I see coming up in government, and women who are going for office, being on their host committees and doing all that other stuff, right? Playing my role. And in government, I've been blessed with an amazing staff, who some of them are on here tonight, was put together by Vanessa Caesar. So I'm going to shout her out for her hard work in coordinating this. And, it gets tough. Like, we all have families, but this is the business that we choose to be in. And it is something that is fulfilling. And listening to both of you speak, I just see how fulfilling each of your careers have been. And I'm just full for all that you've shared today. And I just want to thank you on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of my constituents in the 31st district tuning in. And I look forward to what's next and being able to partner with you again. And I just want to give you a moment if you have anything you want to close us out with.
Well, I just want to say thank you to yourself, but also to all the people that are listening, the audience. Thank you for chiming in and spending an hour or so with us this evening. Happy Women's History Month to all the women out there. and just a simple thank you. And thank you to my co-panelists. Thank you so much for sharing all that you shared with us this evening.
Yeah, and I too want to say thank you, Majority Whip, for bringing us together. I don't think this happens enough because, you know, I'm here in Charlotte earlier this evening, I was at Livingstone College with Reform Alliance talking about the importance of, you know, criminal justice reform. And sometimes the issues can be heavy and tough, but it's like I've lightened up from just being in community with you talking. And it's just really important that we as women know that we need to be there for each other. We need to support each other. My saying that I love is lift as I climb, right? Because as the chief said, what does all of this matter if you have not helped someone, right? And you know, we are blessed to be a blessing. And it's just really important. And more times than not, when you're helping someone else, it makes you feel better and it gives less time for you to be concerned about a lot of the other things that many times isn't all that important in the scheme of things. And so I just want to thank you and everyone for joining, and just know that you're not by yourselves. And it's really important to connect in with others, because more times than not, you know, everything ain't what it looks like on social media. People have some bad days, and it's great to be able to have some people that you can call and get, you know, support from.
Thank you, thank you, thank you once again. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
You as well. Thank you.
You.
Bye-bye.